So I wanted to go over what transfer was, the barriers, and the solutions to those barriers for transfer of learning. So really quickly, if you go to the week 2 agenda and it's entitled transfer, you scroll down. We talked a little bit about transfer. Transfer is essentially taking something that we've learned and then being able to apply that to a different situation. Make sure that you watch this video. It's a really good video. It explains transfer really well. And then what I wanted to talk about, because we didn't get a chance to talk about this in class, is the barriers and then some of those solutions. And then if anyone is interested in the research on any of these, or if you're going to be using transfer as your research paper topic, you have some nice articles that you could look at if they help with what you're using for your research paper. So the first barrier that I wanted to talk about is that learning is context dependent. So essentially what that means is that we learn content and then that is only applied to the context in which we're talking about. And so that obviously would be a barrier to transfer, because the whole principle behind transfer is that we take the information and then we can transfer that to a new situation. So one way to overcome that is to make sure that we make learning relevant for our students and help them make those transfers to new information. Give them the chance to practice that. Transfer can also lead to incorrect assumptions or misconceptions. So students can actually learn information and then apply that to some sort of a misconception, or have a misconception about how it is applied. And so we need to make sure that learners know the material inside and out, they reflect on that material, they can provide some sort of self-explanation of the material, so that they have a deeper understanding of that to help combat some of those misconceptions. Again, students need to practice this. This isn't something that students do well on their own. And honestly, it takes years for even adults to learn to do this well on their own. So anyway, that's a really important barrier that we should be aware of. Cognitive resources can become overloaded. We're going to talk about cognitive load in a couple of weeks, maybe. I don't remember the week exactly, but we will be talking about cognitive load. So in order to kind of reduce cognitive load, we should sort of chunk information or minimize the amount of information that we're providing, but then also provide pictures, audio, maybe audio, text to help prevent cognitive resources from becoming overloaded. When we get overloaded with too much extraneous information or extra information, we sort of shut down. Many learners can shut down. Some see it as a challenge, but many just shut down, and then learning doesn't occur. And when learning's not occurring, it's hard to have transfer occur as well. Consistency in learning and practice. So we don't want to always teach things the same way. That can become boring, less motivating, and less engaging for students. So we try to mix things up for our students. We want to strive for something that we call desirable difficulty. You want things to be just hard enough for your students that it takes a little bit extra work. Research shows that that actually improves learning. And when we have students expand or take the information that they're learning and apply it to different situations, again, that's just going to improve that transfer that we want to have happen. Gaps of knowledge. So that's something that we need to make sure. This can be a barrier to transfer of learning, because when students don't understand a concept fully and they have some gaps in there, obviously they're not going to be able to transfer the information. So we need to make sure as teachers that we're constantly testing, looking for their areas of weakness, practicing those areas of weakness, and then making sure that we strengthen those to improve transfer outcomes. We shouldn't have unrealistic goals for our students, and students tend to have unrealistic goals themselves. So one thing that it's really important to do, and we'll talk about this during the metacognitive strategy week, is we want to set goals and measure their progress often. Again, that requires lots of practice and testing, and we've talked about that before, especially in 224. So establish clear goals to increase learning and aid in transfer. We have to make sure that our our students are, so another barrier can be that they're unable to generalize the content. So we need to make sure that we can make the content apply to various areas. Again, that's what transfer is, but making sure that our students see the big picture. It's really good if we can help relate content to their own experiences, look for patterns in the content, and then relationships with other content areas. So again, that's just really important for transfer. This is really important for any content area, but especially in mathematics, where students can see how that math content actually applies to a real life situation. Individualized learning can be a barrier. I know schools are looking to individualize or personalize education or learning more, but this can actually become a barrier to transfer. Transfer happens much more readily when we're able to collaborate with others. So if we are just working in isolation, that can be a difficult situation for transfer to occur. So we have to have collaborative learning that promotes engagement and increases retention, which is why I try to get my students, just like I do in our classes, I try to get us talking as much as possible, but it's also really important for our K-12 kiddos as well. And then when content is not relatable, that just kind of makes sense. If we're trying to get information to carry over or transfer into other content or other situations, it's really important to make sure that that content is relatable to our students. So one way to do that is by making analogies and metaphors to help someone or to help our students relate to potentially unrelated ideas. Especially if if the analogy that you're using is something that's very well known to the student, it's easier for that information to seem more relatable. So those are just some barriers and solutions that I wanted to discuss. If you have any questions, make sure you reach out in class. I would like for this video to be seen quickly, and I'll talk about when I'd like it due in class today.